Joshua Lisec is a ghostwriter who's written 64 books and built a business around helping people communicate with the world. He works for himself and has honed his craft and focus to work with some of the truly elite performers in the world. This podcast is sponsored by me. Please go to joshcherryplays.com to see what I'm up to. First of all, thanks for coming on.
It's my pleasure, Josh. Thanks for inviting me on.
I just want to start with the question, what made you decide you wanted to start working for yourself?
Several things that together snowballed into a decision that was unavoidable. The first of which was being homeschooled. When you're homeschooled, you're basically self-taught. Yes, there's specific subjects you have to take. You have to take the tests, you have to write the essays, those sorts of things. But the majority of your time is unstructured, and you can kind of do what you want. In a way, that is a preview of self-employment. The necessity is earning enough to pay the bills, and then you can have fun on this or that crazy side project, or scaling up, or getting new clients, or just kind of following whatever interests you want to tinker with. That was the first experience. The second experience was my first real job, which I got when I was 9 years old. It was newspaper delivery plus account management. And so I learned early on the relationship between your income and getting customers and serving those customers. Another preview of self-employment. So that was the second one. The third experience was while I was in college, I began working in a local government center and had for the first time a structured experience of employment where, for example, certain aspects of customer service, answering certain questions, were forbidden for people at the pay level that I had. Oh, you have to refer them to someone, even if you know the answer. That's the way we do things around here. Those are the rules. Made absolutely no sense. And so those three early experiences, which I had before I even turned 18, made self-employment inevitable.
We have multiple things in common already. I was homeschooled, and I also have a bit of a problem with arbitrary rules.
There you go. There you go. And something about arbitrary rules is that I've learned even for myself that I don't want to have those in my own business. We have to do things because this is just the way we do it. And also my relationship with my son. I have a 3-year-old boy, and there's a recent experience I'm a little proud of. Okay, more than a little proud of. One of the things that we do not do is enforce arbitrary, whimsical rules and limits around food. For example, we want our little boy to be as independent as possible with wisdom, exercising his agency. And we notice that if we, just like an employer, try to constrict behavior for whatever reason, especially when it doesn't make sense, guess what's going to happen? Rebellion, resistance, disobedience, the sort of things that you don't want. So for example, we regularly tell our son to listen to his body. What's your body telling you, right? Our instinct, our gut instinct is many, many thousands of generations old. And so what's going to be a better judge of what to do? His many thousands year old gut instinct, or some arbitrary rule? No, you can't have that sweet or that piece of candy or whatever. So here's what I'm particularly proud of. Usually on Tuesdays, I take my little boy out we usually go to a little coffee shop and get like a little pastry or something, right? Well, yesterday he'd want to have a little bonfire and a little marshmallow first thing in the morning. So, okay, we do that. And what a lot of parents would do is, okay, you've had your sugar for today. No more sugar for you. No sweets for you. I didn't do that. We keep our typical coffee shop run. While we're in the parking lot, before we get in, my little boy says to me, I don't want a cookie today. I already had sugar. At no point were there any limits or anything like that. He's 3, and he was able to judge based on where his blood sugar was, his gut instinct, that he didn't want any more. So that early experience I had in my childhood of not wanting to have there be arbitrary limits or rules, I realized when you don't have those, you can actually make better decisions for yourself.
Tradition is a fascinating thing to me. I was, I don't know, maybe 20, and I saw a talk with the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama had come to visit. And there was a really cool moment that I never forgot, his audience was a bunch of college students, so you know it was catered to the right crowd. And for that talk, it was the right thing to say in the context. I think it was he said, um, "Don't throw away your family's traditions on a whim. Like don't just assume that you should toss all of them out the window." And because you know at college age you're just ready and eager to do that, right? You know you're ready to throw all of it out. And for a college age student, and I mean for anybody who is, you know, developing in an adult mind, they have to go through this process where they look at past traditions and kind of analyze them. And a lot of this stuff comes out as arbitrary, right? You know, like a lot of it comes across as like, oh man, that just has no meaning at all. And I think sometimes it's true. And I think sometimes, you know, we're in a position maybe where we're too dumb to see it or something, right? We're young. But I also agree with you that putting a bunch of arbitrary rules in place, um, it's it's really destructive in a bunch of sneaky ways. But also, we need structure, right? We need some set of rules to live our lives by. And tradition is one of those weird sets of things that's often seemingly a bunch of arbitrary rules for somebody growing up that often keeps people functional. How do you, if you've been exploring this, how do you approach this idea of like looking at a rule set and deciding, okay, is this a structural element that even if it's maybe seems a little bit silly, I'm going to continue with it to you know keep my structure afloat versus okay, I'm going to analyze this thing, I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to go my own way. And a really obvious example of this is Christmas, right? Because you know, Christmas you can go down the line of disproving it a million different ways, right? And then once you've fully disproved it, now you don't have a pleasant family function to attend. You know, it's like it's not much of a win. But how do you approach deciding, you know, how much of old things to throw up in the air?
That's a really good question. The point you made about the Dalai Lama reminded me of this thing called G.K. Chesterton. He had it called Chesterton's Fence. The principle is don't tear down a fence until you know why it was built in the first place.
Yes.
And that seems to be really useful, both on a social or civilizational basis, as well as an individual basis. If you don't have structure, you can't build anything. You can't build a career, self-employed or otherwise. You can't build a boy, in the case of my son. The question is about tradition. It seems to me that traditions thrive on nostalgia. Nostalgia is the fuel for traditions. And so I look at the things that my wife, her family, we, and my son, that we all do as part of various holiday traditions or just routines, things that we do. And if we were to look at why those fences were built, it was because there's some sort of either survival or thriving outcome that's part of that. So for example, like going and seeing your Christmas lights in the neighborhood, or going to this or that little Christmas show, or going on walks, gift giving, those sorts of things, they give a structure to our lives. And this is the sort of thing that we do every year. We know what to expect. They say that's particularly helpful about something with children, is giving children something that they know what they're going to expect, like going to bed at pretty much the same time every night, having pretty similar foods on the table at the pretty similar time of day, pretty similar activities on each day of the week, to kind of get some semblance of the structure. The structure when you're self-employed is very simply survive. First of all. And so you are essentially in a box of, I have to get customers or clients and I have to make them happy. That is the first rule of self-employment. Find clients, make them happy. for a price that they're going to agree to pay, and then I can live off, right? So reality itself has given me a rule, a fence. I can't just tear that down and say, oh, I'm just going to do whatever I want and money will come. Doesn't really work that way. So if you want to build a self-employed career, you have to look at what the actual rules are. What are the defenses that you really don't want to move? In the same way, I know there's some permissive parents out there who are like, oh, let your kids go to bed whenever they want. It can be 11 o'clock at night, and they give them all the candy that they want. This sort of truly unstructuring, deconstructing reality itself. Well, we know that children thrive if they go to bed at the same, pretty much the same time every night. Like, we know they're going to fare better if we're not pumping candy into them every meal. So for most meals, for example, our son has extremely nutritious meal options to choose from, right? It's not like, okay, here's Skittles on one side and here's a chocolate bar, and then there's whipped cream, and then there's a salad. You know what's going to happen in that situation, right? So we understand that we give him a structure of, here are the things that are on your plate, and he wants to go, eat that extra little snack or whatever, we're not going to worry about it. It's the same in self-employment. Like, as long as I know I'm serving my clients at a price they like, that suits me well, there's so much more freedom. In the same way with traditions, if you're keeping up with the things that produce, let's say, nostalgia that you long for, nostalgia is a biological hint that you ought to keep doing the thing that has given you the emotion of nostalgia in the first place, like gift-giving traditions or Christmas Eve service, or those sorts of things that you recall from your childhood. That's a signal to keep doing them.
Yes, it seems, I mean, culturally we seem to be doing it a lot right now, but also it's something that I think everybody goes through to a degree, and they're 20s, is this phase of saying that structure doesn't make sense. Let's throw it up in the air. And I think there's a lot of good in that, but you don't want to throw it up and not replace it with anything. You can't remove it and put nothing in its place. So there seems to be a necessity to look at what you're deciding to keep or throw away, and just to ask the question, what purpose does it serve? And I think once you ask that question, that's when you really do get free, right? Because we often throw up a lot of structures in the air because we want the freedom, right? But if we throw up structures themselves arbitrarily, then we end up in such a chaotic position that we're really not that free. But if we go, okay, this particular idea was trying to serve this purpose, how can I serve that purpose myself? Now the world is open to you, and you can solve that need any way you choose.
100%. And you might make me think of something that's very simple that most people encounter. In fact, all adults, the power bill. That's a rule. If you want internet and lights and other appliances in order to survive, you got to pay the power bill. So that is a rule, so to speak. In the old world, the old economy, old money, the best and only way to pay the power bill was to get a job or to be rich somehow and then start a business and employ people who enriched you. So there was like, either take a little job or have enough capital that you could start the business, right? We don't live in that world where you only have two choices, one of which is realistic. Get a job at a factory, work 60 hours a week or more for 40 years, and you'll get a small pension to take care of you in your old age before you die at 62. We don't live in that world anymore. But the rule itself is the power bill has to get paid. That's your fence, right? Okay, so that's where the fence is. I'm not going to just say, let's dismantle capitalism and let's deconstruct civilization and the economy, tee-hee. Well, what are you left with? The power bill still has to get paid, right? When you realize that's what the rule is, and there's different ways to meet that, it could be a combination of a couple of different side hustles, starting a business, keeping a job, see if you can work from home while you have something else that's going on the side. You could transition to part-time. You could do this. You could do that. There are many different ways once you know what that structure is. And it's the structure that we bring to, let's say, our little boy's nutrition. We know that if we ensure that there are multiple nutritious meal options for him there, and he gets to choose which of the 2 or 3 or 4 things he wants to eat, we know that whatever he chooses within that structure will be a good choice for him. We're not putting Skittles on there. But when he's asked for chocolate chips, for example, sure, we'll put chocolate chips on the plate. And then guess what? He'll eat 4 or 5 and he'll say, I'm all done. He won't eat the bag, which seems to be what happens when you create artificial restrictions in anything. Is there's resistance and there's rebellion and there's resentment. And as soon as you can get away with it, you're going to eat the whole bag and then vomit and it's uncomfortable. And now you've created a habit of binge eating. I know a lot of people can probably relate to these ideas of artificial restrictions. Josh, you said a few minutes ago that you related to some of my upbringing and homeschooling and whatnot. What was it about being homeschooled early on that made you the person that you are today?
So, one of the things that was done quite well was the education of that independence. And I'm also drawn to working for myself. I'm also drawn to that process. And then interestingly enough, we did have some very structured rules at times around food. And I had some real sugar issues for years.
So did I.
And
So did I. Same.
yeah, yeah. But yes, it was being homeschooled was a really interesting way to learn about self-education, right? Because you learn to teach yourself pretty early on, and then that extrapolates to ways of finding your own path. And I think there's a lot of beauty in it in its ability to teach you that you can shape your life, right? I think that it can educate you on that point very well.
Good. Good.
So uh, as you decided to go this self-employed path and you had to keep your structures in place, how did you decide to pay the bills?
Yeah, yeah. Well, for anyone who doesn't know me by my name, I go in many circles online as the Ghostwriter. So I've recently turned 30, and as far as I know, I've ghostwritten more books than anyone else at my age. I've been doing this ghostwriting for 10 years, thousands of blog posts, articles, web pages, product descriptions, but more than 60 books that I've ghostwritten, including a couple of novels for myself on top of that. And these are authors that are ranging from Wall Street Journal bestsellers, let's say verified accounts on social media, truly famous people, on down to great grandma who wants a memoir so that she can tell her great grandkids what it was like growing up during the Depression and then the war. Sort of gamut of projects. And one often asks, how did you get to that point? Did you like go to ghostwriting school and then you get a ghostwriting job, and then after the job you go independent? Not like that at all. I did not even know that ghostwriting was a thing when I decided to become self-employed. So it goes back to when I was in college. At that time, I had several professors who remarked that my essays were significantly better than that of my competition, other students, but it's
Of course.
competitors. Let's be real now.
Oh
And
yeah.
they said, you might want to do this professionally. Your homeschooling served you pretty well. You can write better than most. You could be a technical writer or a copywriter or communications consultant. Not that I knew what that was, but I thought, okay, well, I think I know what a freelance writer is. I think I'll be a freelance writer. So the summer of my junior year in college, I quit that government job that I had for almost 3 years, and I call myself freelance writer for hire. And I knew I had to get a lot of projects quickly in order to pay the power bill and other things. So the first gig that I got was $1.67 an hour. $1.67 an hour. First gig I ever got over 10 years ago. But that was the first money I'd ever earned for myself. And at that point, I was hooked because I'd realized that there was someone outside of traditional employment, a job, quote unquote, who would pay me as an adult real money. because I had the paper route as a kid, but this was like in quote unquote the real world, outside of the neighborhoods that I knew, outside of the families that I knew, out there in the world through the internet. And one thing led to another. And while I'm writing product descriptions and writing web copy and doing little projects here and there as a freelancer, I thought I'm going to go ahead and take the inspiration from those stories that I read, those novels that I read when I was homeschooled. After I would get done with my homework super early, I had nothing else to do, I'll read some novels. The spirit of good fiction came alive again when I was in college. And I thought, I think I'm going to write a couple novels. I did. Got a book publishing deal for 2 novels. I'm signing books. I'm speaking at conferences and on panels, taking selfies with fans. Then something interesting happens. My freelance writing clients heard about my novels. 2 of the clients said, Joshua, read your books. They're really good. Like, they're surprisingly good. Like, you're 20 and I've wanted to write a book longer than you've been alive. Can I hire you to write my book, please? 2 people said that, independent of one another. And I said, okay, fine, sure. I guess I'll help you with your book. And that is my first and second ghostwriting project, respectively, about going almost back 10 years now. And so it was not even the, I'm going to be a ghostwriter desire or dream. It was just, wow, I need to take care of myself. I really don't like this restrictive traditional employment environment, but I have skill that maybe someone would pay me to use for them. So rather than wonder who's going to take care of me, it was me realizing I had to take care of myself, but I had a skill that I was wondering, will someone pay me anything for this? And sure enough, they would. Starting at $1.67 an hour, but I haven't charged that much or that little in quite a while. But that's the beginning of the story, is what's the skill that I had? And I knew it was a skill because I had a couple of people that I respected told me about it, who didn't have a vested interest in it. Like, if I became a freelance writer or I became a college professor, would not affect my professors at all. So they were impartial, unbiased, you might even say, let's say mentors in my life. And so because they would not financially benefit from me choosing to do that, I knew that I could trust them. So I think there's a lesson there. People who praise you, who don't have any vested interest in you following their praise, there's a lot of wisdom in what they're saying. And if they're pointing out different skills that you have, that they think you've got something there, that very well could be one of your best ways to keep the power bill paid.
Did you feel aware of your skill sets before that was pointed out to you?
I didn't, because to me, writing clearly is just what I did in the assignments. You know, we had kind of a bit of a classical education style homeschool curriculum that involved a lot of critical thinking and writing, and we even had speech and debate class, you know, back in 04 and 05. Kind of dating myself a little bit here. Well, that's okay. We're all millennials, except those of us who aren't, I suppose. In any case, it was just normal, just what I did. I thought it was okay. But there were a couple of times where I got a peek at fellow students' essay assignments or homework assignments. Right around the time that I got praise from my professors, I saw just how bad the assignments of other students were. Now, when I say bad, here's what I mean. I mean copying and pasting multiple paragraphs from Wikipedia into your essay, leaving the Wikipedia subject headings, topic headings, leaving the references, the citations, without actually including the citations, and leaving the spelling errors inside of it and saying, here's my assignment. That was my competition. And that's when I realized maybe I've got something here. Maybe they're right. So that would be another thing I think you could say, is realizing the level of your competition. Another good example of competition right now, very different from ghostwriting, is in blue collar and gray collar professions. But a lot of people who are reading this are probably thinking about different skill sets, career paths, the next thing to do, new side hustle, new business, new thing to study. Something like 6 blue collar / gray collar / trade small business owners that I know. So think like bricklaying, electricity, HVAC, plumbing. They cannot find a single person to work for their business. Literally a one-man show who charges $20,000 a week for labor to go up and do remodeling. He does about 4 remodels a month. It's $80,000 a month, just him, plus materials. He would like to not do that because he's in his late 60s now, but that's almost $1 million a year for his labor. He cannot find a single person. He said, Joshua, I'm getting too old for this. Like, I can do it. It's great money. There's not many gigs that pay $80,000 a month, but there's nobody out here. I know a bricklayer buddy. He's in the same situation. He's in his late 60s. He dresses like a hippie. He drives a Charger, and he's almost 70. This guy, he has 4 Chargers now. He earns about $60,000 a month, and it's just him. And I think it's his son who works a couple of days a week for him while studying at such and such university. And of course, there's parts in his labor and his business expenses, but there is literally no competition. The competition is ask for a quote and they never call you back. It's, hey, I have a plumbing emergency. Don't hear back from him. Hey, do you know anyone who can rewire this part of the house? No. Look them up online. 1-star review, 1-star review, 1-star review, 1-star review. Never got back to us. Scammed us. And this area and I live, there's 1.1 million people. So part of what is a good self-employment path for me is not just what do I have? What skills do I have? It's what skills do potential competitors really lack? And I noticed in my own world, I do a lot of promoting on social media. There's maybe 2 or 3 other ghostwriters who show their faces online and do anything with video. And so I've been posting YouTube videos for 3-4 years. But I am super active on social media, going live, creating courses, showing my face. So I know that that's an advantage that I have because I'm willing to do it. And in the case of the bricklayer, in the case of the remodeling guy, just actually showing up on time and not breaking the customer's house while you're there is literally enough to make nearly $1 million a year as a solopreneur. So I think there's a lot of lessons that can be gleaned from just a couple of observations. What do you have? What do potential competitors not have?
I think we're going through a fascinating time in history where opportunities are just everywhere. And I think you just emphasized it right there, is there are fields that have been historically, very competitive, hard to make much more than a basic living in, that now they are just full of opportunity. I want to go back slightly to the what skills do you have concept, and I have a theory here. That is, we're biologically wired to ignore the things we're best at. And to me, this makes a ton of sense, which is basically, we learn by imitation, right? We learn by looking at what others do. And because of that, we're going to, and also we have to use comparison, right? So when we look at others, we look at what they have and what we don't. And then through that process, we see the gaps and we try to fill them through imitation. And that's the majority of learning is that process right there. So because of that, we have trained into us the ability to look at where we're lacking, not where we're abundant. And then even on top of this, there's one other aspect of this. So that's one aspect, which is it's a habit, right? It's a habit to look at what we don't have. It's a habit to look at our weaknesses, try to build them up. It's a habit to look at other people's strengths and wish that we had those. Those are all habits. And then there's this other element that's interesting. It's so obvious, which is we're habit forming creatures, and whatever you're best at, you're going to form a habit there first. So if you're really good at writing, you're going to get so good at writing that you don't think about writing. You just write.
Yes.
If you're really good at navigating conversations, you're not going to know that you're good at navigating conversations because it's going to become your default way of navigating the world. You're going to utilize that strength unconsciously, and nobody's going to point it out to you, generally speaking, and you're not going to see it because you're going to be busy thinking about all of the things that you can't do. Um, this is something I've noticed over and over again, and I've noticed in myself, and it seems like to find your strengths without external help, you almost have to look at that blind spot in your world, like that little area of dark matter on the telescope, and you have to poke in there to actually find what you're good at. And so, uh, it's 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 a I think it's necessary because we have to look at others to survive, right? A lot of the things that keep us alive also create lots of stress and struggle for us later on. I think this is a thing that we have to do. We have to look outwards to figure out how to live. But I believe that that process by default makes us less capable of finding those things that we're good at.
What was one of the first blind spots of yourself that you brought into focus, you shined a spotlight on, and thought, oh wow, I didn't know everyone wasn't good at this like I am?
Hmm. Well, I mean, people started pointing out my vocabulary pretty early because it was notable, right? It was noteworthy. And I wouldn't have come to that conclusion myself. I just started to read lots of books, so I picked up lots of words. I mean, a lot of them were very mispronounced. I still have early memories of disasters with mispronouncing words because I learned them in books before I learned to speak them. And when I was real young, I remember thinking in print instead of spoken word because I had a wider vocabulary in my own reading. So I would actually think in print. Today I think in speech, but early on that's the way it was. And when I wanted to like form a sentence, I would actually read it off to somebody. I would see that the sentence that I wanted to say, and I'd read it off to somebody. But yeah, people would comment on my vocabulary, and that made me start to think that I had some understanding of words. Um, but interestingly enough, that didn't pay off for decades, because that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough to just see that I had like some advantage there. I went and pursued things in different ways that were very much not my strength. So I went into music, and I was a good musician, and I had a lot of talent for music, but I never used any of my talents. My talents were that of improvisation, ideation, composition.
Yeah.
I was very exploratory, and I majored in classical violin performance, which is one of the most structured things you can do. And I just wasn't very good, and it was because I was trying to shore up my weaknesses. I thought, oh, I'm not good at this structure. I'd better learn it, right? I didn't realize that there was something else that I was more capable of. And interestingly, in all of those years, once Facebook was around, I would write long posts just to get things off my chest because I just had a thing to say for years. And I would go to parties and people would actually comment on things that I'd said on Facebook, which that's not something that normally happens. You don't usually talk about anything that happens on Facebook. You usually try to ignore it all. But people would actually comment and say, "Man, I really was thinking about this thing that you wrote." And I just didn't see it as anything. It was just me getting things off my chest. And until years later, I ended up starting to read some of my writing off on TikTok, and it took off like crazy. And that was one of the strengths that I started to fully embrace over the years. But it took many years for that to evolve. And um, more and more I'm trying to emphasize in conversations with people is that like we're not undervaluing our strengths a little bit. We're undervaluing them a ton.
Something else I think you could point out is we're undervaluing strengths we've forgotten about. We've forgotten about.
Yes.
So, like in your case, this moving writing that you had done years ago on Facebook, long before TikTok was ever founded,
Yes.
you resurrected it. So it sounds like there's something to be said for resurrecting talents. Resurrecting talents. I think I'm a good example of that as well. 2012, 2013, 2014, I was doing professional theater like crazy. It was fun. It was fun. I was a bit of an animated little child when I was a older toddler, and that melodrama returned. What better way to do this and see if I could get paid for this?
Yeah.
Pay was horribly low, but it was one of the ways that you help pay the power bill. So I did it for a few years. That's how I met my now wife and mother of my son, which is pretty cool. But recently, 3 years ago, I brought back the spirit of drama and performance first for my TEDx talk, so I could give an audition that made people go, oh wow, this guy's like a trained performer, we need to have him on our stage. And then with YouTube and podcast interviews, just showing up and not speaking in a monotone, just kind of talking like this and mumbling like most people do. The opposite of what you want from an engaging guest or speaker, or even just watching YouTube videos. So now I get maybe 80% of my business because of video that I do. So video courses, video interviews, videos going live and sharing videos on Twitter, videos I've recorded on YouTube. Even my TEDx talk still gets me clients nowadays. It's all because of video. And that's from like 2017 to present. Like the last 4 years I've been doing that, but that's because of what I did 2012, 2013, 2014. So there was a 3-year gap where Joshua, the performer, was dormant. But I brought him back for this. So it very well could be that missing talent of the talent stack is something you used to enjoy and be good at. And now the improvisation that you mentioned, Josh, from like music, what is an interview but improv?
Correct. Yes, 100%. It's yeah, it's something that I think we don't really devote any time to. The average person, I think, devotes basically 0% of their time to really going, hey, what am I good at? There's and it's counter even to a lot of self-development motivational talk, which is within that community a lot of people talk about building up your weaknesses. And I think building up your weaknesses is good as an exercise, like going to the gym. Going to the gym is useful, but it's not how you pay the power bill for most people. It's something that broadens your life. It enriches your life. And I think that working on weaknesses is a great way to enrich your life. But I think to have a leveraged position on something where you're winning big, you're getting ahead of the competition.
Yeah.
That's a place to lean on your strengths. And I don't think that's talked about enough.
I think maybe one of the reasons why there seems to be this civilization-wide emphasis on weaknesses. Think about the zero-sum world of the hunter-gatherer, a band of 50, 75, 150 people, all of whom are related in some way. Either they have a descendant or a relative who's married to someone inside the tribe, or their kids are intermingled or whatever. What you were good at, let's say you were good at tracking mammoth and mastodon. Let's say you're good at making fire, but you sucked at finding fresh, safe water sources. Y'all gonna die pretty quick. And so the people who were good at, yeah, we can hunt mammoth and mastodon, and yeah, we can hunt, and you know, you can gather berries and nuts and tree roots and herbs, and yes, we can build fire, we can build the best cave, we can make the best cave art, but we really need to focus on what we're not good at, which is the water. So there seems to be a bias, almost like maybe perhaps even a genetic bias towards, well, what are the weaknesses that could get us killed?
Yes.
And because we are truly not meant to live in the age we find ourselves. We're meant to live on the savannah and on the tundra and in caves. And that's what our body is built for, right? Like we're not meant for the internet. We're not meant for clothes, frankly, shoes even, right? Yet here we find ourselves. And so we bring what used to help us survive and thrive into the modern world, and it does the opposite.
Yes.
Because you've taken us out of the biome, the wild, the wilderness, with a small group of people that we're meant to live our entire lives with. You put that creature completely out of the, you take away from 150 people, and now you have 150 opinions to deal with every 5 minutes on Twitter or on whatever social media. And we have the entire world at our fingertips. When before, we would spend our entire lives in like a 5 square mile area. We could go anywhere in the world. There's something to be said for that, but we're not meant for the world that we live in now. And so we realize, well, what am I optimized for? You can then find out ways you need to hack your own biology. And one of those ways is, wow, when I feel like focusing on my weakness, that's because ancestors of mine did that so that they would find the fresh water and not die. Am I at risk of not having fresh water? No. So the conscious mind might be able to, with consistency, overcome the unconscious mind there, or the genetic or epigenetic shenanigans going on there. I feel like that could be an hour and a half conversation just on itself, is, you know, the modern world versus the pre-modern body that we have.
I completely agree. It's a big factor in all of this, that a lot of the things that enable us to survive are often counterproductive to thriving. You have to play a different game to do that. So you to get back onto the timeline of your story, you got to a point where you survived, and you got these two jobs ghostwriting. Was it just customers flowing right in from then on out? No problems ever finding somebody to write for? Or I imagine it might be.
I would like to think that that was the case, but because I was homeschooled, because I was frankly in charge of whether or not this essay is good enough to show my mom. You know, as a school teacher, right?
Yeah.
I was the standard, not a teacher or a rubric or a syllabus or something like that in the curriculum. Because I mean, there's no teachers, there's no superintendent, there's no principal. Like, I was the standard, but I was really good at it. And so I realized that an essay that was good enough for me would blow my professor away. And so I've carried that standard into that $1.67 an hour project and into other projects, realizing that if it's good enough for me, it's going to blow the client away. And I've carried that standard into larger and larger projects, more and more clients. And what ends up happening is the good enough for Joshua, way better than expected for the client, results in them telling their buddies, you got to hire this guy. So I'll give you an example. There's somebody that I write sales emails, sales newsletters for every single month, and made him a lot of money. His sales page, which I wrote, converts at 9.9%, which is absolutely unheard of for any type of sales page. And it's like 10,000 words. It's literally a novella, basically. Pro tip for people who write copy: if your copy is not converting, make it longer. Your numbers will probably go up. That's the first tip to pull from that. The second thing is, wow, Joshua the writer makes me a lot of money. He's going to tell everyone he knows who says to him, man, I'm having some trouble writing this book. I'm having trouble writing this blog post. I'm having trouble with this. Oh, I know the guy who can help you make money writing. This guy over here, Joshua. And so that one person has referred, I think, 6 people to me in the last 6 months because
Wow.
his writing met the Joshua standard of what I sent into him. And so the lesson there is giving each client your best means that they can then go be a little salesperson for you, a little marketer. I have done social media advertising. I've given podcast interviews here and there and done speaking, and I have my shenanigans on Twitter. But it has been a consistent line of business going back to 2011. I think of all the people, the clients I first had, I still get clients today as a result of referrals going back to 2011. It's 10 years later. That's longevity. And so that's what you want to do, is you want to focus on getting as many clients as you need to keep the power bill on. Survive, right? But in your survival, give those clients who help you survive your excellence. And in so doing, they will help you thrive because of referrals, because of business they send you.
What were some of the challenges that you ran into in getting to this stage?
They were not so much talent, really. It's what I do exactly as the business of writing. It's the logistics, it's the operations, because I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to business school. I didn't have some business mentorship or whatever from the very beginning. So how do you structure your pricing? How do you make sure you pay your estimated taxes? How do you build your project management system? How do you do all of these things that, frankly, enable you to get more clients and take good care of them? The back end, so to speak, that has been the most painful learning experience of my entire solopreneur journey, is how do I empower myself to do the thing I actually am getting paid to be doing, and managing client projects and file sharing and contractors or subcontractors I have that I collaborate with on different tasks here and there, making sure that we're interfacing properly and questions are getting answered and everyone can find what they need, and that all of the legal documents I have with clients and contracts are all up to par. So much of that has been, wow, I don't know how to do that. What's the best way to do that? I could hire for it. I could figure it out. I have freedom, right? The rule is I need an agreement. Okay, well, what's the best way to meet that rule? Is it a template? Is it a tool? Is it a wizard of some sort, like a legal wizard, or is it hiring a lawyer directly to get help with this? What I have found is it is better to pay with money than with time on operations. Meaning, if you can pay for a software to do it for you, don't do it manually. Don't do it yourself. Don't do it with your own time. If you can hire a lawyer for $500 to draft an agreement for you, don't spend 5 hours piecemealing together a legal Zoom document from all over the internets, which will probably be missing a clause and screw you over, because it would have been better to pay $500 than spend 5 hours on it, for example. So that was a hard lesson to figure out, because I felt like if I'm not doing hard work, then I'm a bad person. A lot of us were programmed like, if the work isn't tiring and tedious and menial and boring, it's not real work and you're cheating, right? I think a lot of millennials had that message, kind of ingrained to us, that if it's too easy, you're a bad person, you lack integrity. And so I was drawn to, and I stuck myself on manual tasks I had no business doing, like records for taxes and bookkeeping and creating a Word document based project management and file sharing system. But it was tiring and tedious and mentally draining. And so I felt like I was supposed to be doing it like a good little worker, when there is software like ClickUp that do all of that for a single user for free. I felt really stupid once I figured that out, that I had followed my own, and that's a good example of the survival trumping the thrival. I guess that's a word now.
It is now.
It is now. Yeah. So I was my own victim in that capacity. I felt like I had to work really, really hard to, because that was like the survival speaking, but I know I don't have to do that. Just use ClickUp. Just use Google Drive. Just use Calendly. Just use Zoom. Just use Stripe. You don't need to be doing all of this manual stuff because it feels like real work, because it's tiring and taxing and takes a while and you feel accomplished afterwards. So congratulations, I played myself, as the meme goes.
Yes. I have found myself very much in that same camp of struggle. How do you figure out what the real work is?
I think the real work is that which is closest to making the client happy, making them money, saving them time. And so realizing what matters most to the client. Well, like, let's say it's because I don't just write books, I write a lot of sales copy. So in a sales copy project, what is the most important thing to the client, not to me, to the client? It is speaking from the heart about what their product is going to do for people and having someone who can capture that vision with the right words. Therefore, 80% of my time on that project, following the 80-20 principle, which is like a good little tool to use, and kind of like a little mental model to use with everything in every project, 80% of my time needs to be focused on what's most important to the client in this case. And the rest of my time just eliminate it because that stuff doesn't really matter. Right? It's the 80-20. So in that case, I need to be fully focused and fully engaged in interfacing with the client, interviewing them, and getting their words captured. And maybe that means I spend 2 hours with them. Early on, I used to write copy by getting a project description and spend 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, different headlines and different bullets and different angles and different this and different that. And it was without at all any of the client's feedback. I was just researching, and I was working hard.
Yeah.
Right. I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning and researching, and I get up and then I get up at 5 after 2 hours of sleep, and I would just do all this work and research, and I felt like I was working hard. And then it turns out that I completely misunderstood one of the features of the software. Not recommended. Now what I do is I realize I don't need to spend 10 hours researching it. I just need an hour or an hour and a half interfacing directly with the client, interviewing them about their product, their service, their feature, their story, in order to get them that 9.9% conversion rate on their sales page. For example, I don't need 10 hours, just need 1. And it's that realization, oh, that's what really matters to the client. I can then structure all of my offerings, all of my services, all of my courses around what's the most important thing people want from this. Screw everything else. Screw everything else. The hardest work is telling yourself, I am not going to get myself stuck in work hard mode, survival mode, tedious task mode, because it feels fulfilling and it gets a dopamine hit. Saying no to that is one of the hardest things that a solopreneur turned business owner has to go through.
What are well, I don't know if you can answer this question, but can you talk about some of the people that you've ghostwritten for?
I can share a few of them. But what I find most interesting is where I think listeners and viewers will find more interesting as well is who hires a ghostwriter? What type of person hires a ghostwriter? And where are they at when they hire a ghostwriter? So there are people that have been all over the place, and people they're in hypnosis, health, finances, marketing, entrepreneurship. But they're all at that point where they've realized the top of their industry is full of crap. Meaning the people who have the New York Times bestsellers, multiple books, they're on the covers of magazines, they're getting the big interviews on this and that podcast, they're on Gary Vee and Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan and whatnot, that they're absolutely full of crap. But they're really good at marketing. They're excellent at making hiring decisions, like hiring a ghostwriter, for example, write them a book that make them look amazing. So the people who come to me are those who are like looking up at others at the top of their industry and like, not no, but hell no. Are they wrong about that? And they know that because they're so competent at what they do. But the branding and the PR and the promotion and the self-promotion and the marketing and the getting yourself out there, the sort of things that someone with a big ego takes like a duck to water on those, but they don't have a big ego. Usually they're service oriented. they just want to help more people. And they even have a resistance to becoming a big famous author person. So there's been people in entrepreneurship, people in hypnotherapy, people in this or that health and wellness space that just, they would rather remain behind the scenes, you know? But it's like, there's other people coming out with books that are full of crap. For example, there's a very, very popular yoga entrepreneur. I'll be working on a book in 2022. It's one of those cases where she's realized, I can't not write my book because there's other people who are writing books about this and they're so bad. I can't stand it anymore. Can't stand it anymore. And it's time to put my name, put my voice, put my story out there. And plus it's also good because it makes you not have to think so hard whenever you're talking to clients or new people. So there is this is one person I can't mention the name of, but he's an executive for hire in Silicon Valley, consults with different companies. By me writing his book and putting his 40 years of his career into one place, he now has his brain downloaded into a book that he can pull out his best lessons and best war stories and tips and techniques, tactics and experiences and strategies. It's all in one place, the best version of everything. So he doesn't remember all anymore. And also, he doesn't have to worry about forgetting an important lesson that a new client needs to know because it's all right there. He can say, oh, that reminds me of that one time, chapter 4, page 37. like quoting his own Bible. You see. So it has different value for different people, but it's usually people who have this almost like this sort of a righteous rage about the terrible advice that's being sold and bought within their industry because the person selling it is a very good marketer, but a terrible liar.
I've noticed this concept that you're talking about in a lot of things where there's this idea of the person that's most worried about the thing is the person who shouldn't be worried about the thing.
Yeah.
So you know, the person that's incredibly worried that they're you know, not going to offer a fair deal, for example. You know, they're out there offering the fairest deals, and they don't need to be thinking about it. The person that is, you know, really worried about hearing everybody's side of a conversation, they're not the person who's going to miss a side of a conversation. They're a person that's going to get walked on, and their own voice is not going to get heard. And and this seems to happen a lot. And yeah, it happens a lot with teachers who have learned enough to know that they know nothing. They've learned enough to know that every student finds their own way, and they've learned enough to be cautious. And they go, oh man, well, you know, I don't want to give the wrong advice. And then they refrain from giving any advice. And that is a net negative for the world. But the people who aren't questioning themselves go ahead and do it. And it's a really interesting phenomenon. I imagine that you've seen a lot of people with that type of mentality and probably have had to coach some of them through it. Have you found yourself in that position? And if so, like what is your perspective to help people make sense of that?
Usually it's when they realize, it's usually towards the end of the project, actually, but like the manuscript is nearly done and they're reading through it and there's two voices in their head. Wow, this is so good, and wow, this is so bad. Wow, this is so good is like, this is exactly what I want to say. This is so meaningful.
Yeah.
Wow, this is so bad. It's not that it's poorly written. It's that, who am I to say this? I can't say this. I'm a nobody. This sounds so authoritative. That's not me. I'm not the expert. I'm a fraud. Burn the manuscript. Fire Joshua. You know, this little voice just kind of takes it on this downward spiral. what usually helps people out is realizing 1 or 2 times when they spoke these same ideas into someone's life, student, client, friend, family member, customer, user, and it changed everything for them. And they realize that that impact that they had on that person's life, they can have that in their sleep, 24/7, 365, because of their book. They can create one transformation after the other, like clockwork, because they authored that book. Are they going to get criticized, critiqued, and called out? You bet. If you don't have any haters, you're not saying anything important. It's when people say you're inauthentic, you're just full of ego, stay in your lane, that's a bad look. Whenever people say stuff like that to you, you know you're doing something right. You know you've made it, and it's time to put your foot on the gas. For those who don't know, that's about an accelerator in a car. No. Kidding on that last part. But that's exactly what it is. It's when you begin to meet resistance, if people call you out, that's when it's time to go hardcore, putting your message out there, because you're important enough to get resistance. So there's, I think maybe a half dozen clients who were the target of assassination attempts that I've had. So 10% of my clients have survived, as far as I know. Though a few have passed away, but you never know about those. So about 10% of my clients, if you have become a client of mine, it's a 10% chance you're going to be assassinated, I guess. That's an assassination. That's a correlation causation fallacy, but it sounds fun to say, for the melodrama and for the trolling aspect of it. But they have something that's so important to say, someone wants to kill them, stop them from saying it. Even if the resistance you meet is not that serious, if there are haters, if there are people saying you're fake, you're a fraud, you're not the real deal, you're lying, you're just in it for the money, you're better than this, there will be a lot of people who say that to you, and that is a green light. That is a green light.
I've been thinking a lot about polarization. I think it's such an interesting concept. And you know, polarization is this thing that to a degree is what we're talking about right now, right? It's essentially you're saying something that has enough meat and potatoes behind it that somebody will either like it or dislike it. It's not going to be neutral. And a lot of us, well, probably all of us, are to some degree afraid to say something that's polarizing. And the argument I've been starting to form in favor of polarization is this. It helps us navigate the world. Because you can't navigate the world on a neutral basis. Because navigation is a form of looking towards a thing that you want and moving towards it. And that's how all humans operate. We all have to do this. This is how we navigate our lives. And polarization is creating a, let's call it a beacon or a channel marker that pushes some people away from that beacon or channel marker and pulls some people towards it. And if you have enough points of polarity in your life, you can define your life. You can define your life by that polarity. You can say, I like this, I don't like this. It's funny, like what's the it's a really common thing for dating. Like if somebody's struggling in the dating world, and you know, a guy's like, yeah, well, I can see both sides of the conversation, and yeah, she asked me what music I liked, and I said I like all the music, and and you know, why was she bored? It's like, because you didn't pick a song. You have to say you liked that song. And why is this? Well, it's because polarity is an offering of value. To say that you like one thing and you dislike another thing is to offer up a navigational beacon. And for some people, that beacon will be, I want to move away from you very fast. And for other people, it will be, I want to move towards you. But for both people, it's a beneficial offering.
That's an excellent way to see the world. I envisioned a road with guardrails on one side. That polarization. There's one guardrail on one side and one guardrail on the other. If you don't have the guardrails, it's not exactly a safe road to go on. And if there's no road, well, where are you? All points of view are valid. Everything is fine. Don't don't stand up. Don't rock the boat. Don't cause any problems. Don't be a troublemaker. Be nice to everybody. But I've learned more and more what's okay for me to be polarizing about on social media. And I think we all need our kind of our internal decision of what we are willing to polarize about and what we're not willing to polarize about.
Yes.
So for me, and I want to know what yours is too, Josh, this will be interesting. So for me, it's, well, why am I on social media? It's to get clients. Because that's the fastest way for the world to find me as a ghostwriter, is to get clients. So because that's why I'm there. I'm not there to shoot the breeze or whatever. I'm primarily there to make clients. If I make friends, well, that's great too, but I'm here for the money. Let's be really, and I say, I'm okay with saying it. Oh, that's so, how could you say that? Oh, so selfish. Screw you. I don't care. See, now I'm being polarizing, because if you don't want to do business with anyone you meet on social media, you're not going to be a good client for me. If you're not on social media also to build your brand, to attract business opportunities, you're not going to be a good client, because I want people who are on social media using that as a way to grow their business and attract opportunities for their business. So I am willing to make a stand on views of mine that I suspect will repel people I don't want as clients. And so that's what my perspective is. And it's taken me a while to figure out the types of people who make for just the nightmare of all nightmares for clients. And I think of those people and I think, what would make them block me? And then I tweet that. and that is the beginning and the end of my polarization strategy. Now, what about for you?
Man, well, that's fantastic. And yeah, you brought up a very good point, which is like, you have to choose what you be polarized on.
Yeah.
Because much like the throwing all structures up in the air that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, you don't want to polarize everything, because
then you're just a troll.
Yeah, and it's just creating chaos. Just like throwing up all structure is. It all goes back to that balance of chaos and order. Something that I've been thinking a lot about is, so I have a lot of history as a teacher, right? I pretty much always in my life, I've kind of taken that role in some fashion with, friends, etc. But then I was a music teacher for about 8 years. And I'm constantly teaching with the things that I'm doing online now. That's just a part of what I do. It's sort of ingrained in me, and it's very rewarding for me to, see people take an idea, get an aha moment, and grow. And I've noticed there's a lot of polarization online right now by highly intelligent people that have a lot to offer. And it results in certain people being unable to hear their message.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I learned this lesson teaching, middle schoolers. If I say things in a language that sets a middle schooler off, they aren't going to learn the lesson. I have to speak the middle schooler's language. I mean, that doesn't mean, adopting their dialect. That just turns you into the cheesy millennial teacher.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Yeah. but it's about learning where they're coming from, right? I have to understand what the child values, right? And one of the things that the child values is image, right? They're extremely concerned with how they appear amongst their social group at that age. You know, that's extremely important. So if I do or say something that implies that it would that, like, say they're following my instructions would bring their image under it would threaten their image in some way, it's an immediate no-go, right? Like there's just no way a middle schooler is going to listen to any professor that might put their social reputation at risk. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's innumerable other sets of values that you have to take into account. So if you speak their language and say things with their value structures in mind, you're more likely to get the lesson across. And so this is something that I'm trying to keep in mind as I create the things that I'm creating, is there's ways to say this that are usefully polarizing, in that it enables somebody to say, I think that's right, I think that's wrong, and you know that kind of sets me off a little bit. And then there's a way to say it that results in a shutdown.
Yeah.
And the people that are making content that are getting a lot of those shutdowns, I think a lot of them want to be teachers, right? They're saying the things that they are saying because they think it's true, right? They want to help the world. But helping the world comes at understanding the other person. And this is something that I've has been on my mind a lot, is how do you be polarized in a manner that opens someone up for an opportunity of learning versus shuts them down.
It seems like the key to the learning opportunity is refusing to manipulate the other person to your point of view. Refusing to use manipulation, like guilting someone or shaming someone, or you're saying you're a bad person if you disagree with me. Good people like me. And I had this a couple of weeks ago on Twitter. I had this thread on manipulation, the common manipulative tactics that you may not realize are manipulative, but once you see them, you can't unsee them. There's a few dozen tweets long. I think it got a couple 100,000 impressions, which is pretty neat. But people resonated with it because they've seen other people do that to them in their personal lives, in their family, on social media. And to see someone else point out that that's what they're doing, it's an instant, okay, I can check that person off as not credible. If they're having to manipulate me to their point of view, polarizing or not, if you have to manipulate me, that means you don't have anything to offer. You're trying to win at my expense. You're trying to get me onto your side. You're a parasite. You have nothing to offer me, but I have everything to offer you, which is why you want me on your side. So when I polarize, I do so without manipulation, without making someone feel bad intentionally, knowing that people are going to feel bad just because you never know what's going to trigger someone's emotions. But as much as possible, choosing a win-win situation as opposed to just being openly manipulative. I'll give you a good example. I call it anti-persuasion, when you try to win someone to your way of thinking and you do so bad that you make the person trust your side, your point of view even less. So it would be better if you hadn't said anything at all. That's anti-persuasion. Some of the most anti-persuasive people on the planet are online Christian evangelists and vegan activists, both anti-persuasive. I have a Christian background, and I am vegan, so I am very aware of the anti-persuasion that my people are known for. the guilting and the manipulation, well, you're going to go to hell. Well, if you eat meat, you're a bad person, right? Those are anti-persuasive messages. And so I think, well, what is the win-win? And that question I apply to sales calls with clients now. Like, I'm going to get you to buy my stuff, and I win and you lose. Ha ha. Terrible way to think about viewing the world. Like it's not really possible to try to be persuasive in other areas and then still be manipulative in others. It is all or nothing. You're all manipulative, and you're all persuasion. Again, persuasion is win-win. Manipulation is I win, you lose. And the best way for me to win is to make you think you've won. So you gaslight someone. You make them believe that your understanding of the world is right, and if they doubt it, then it's their understanding of the world that's wrong. That's dark stuff. That's dark stuff. So in persuasion, I go into every sales conversation with a potential client knowing what I can offer them. And if I can't offer them a win-win, I say, I can't help you. I'm willing to do that. In my relationship with my son, win-win. You know, manipulation would be like, you have to do this right now with a good attitude because I'm the boss. So what does that actually teach my little boy? It teaches my little boy that might makes right. That if someone is more powerful than you, they have the right to make you do something. Imagine an entire population of people who believe that. You get subjects of a government, of an authoritarian power. And the more authoritarian, the easier it's going to be to get them to comply. Not a good situation. I want my boy to be a sovereign individual, like the name of that book, right? People who are sovereign are going to thrive in the future. The information homesteaders and the there's a guy on Twitter, he calls it being a neo-frontiersman, right? Making your own way in the world. But if you teach someone that someone has to tell them what to do, and if they're stronger, then they're the boss and they have to comply no matter what, which is how a lot of parents parent their kids, they're training people up to be submissives to whoever is more powerful. Politically, rules, in relationship, making someone be the doormat in a manipulative business relationship or in a manipulative romantic or sexual relationship, not a good situation. So how does it actually look in practice? Well, when I need my son to do something because it needs to get done because of the structure, the tradition, the fence, we don't really want to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning every night because dismantling the structure of bedtime is not a good idea. We know that he thrives on routine. So let's say it's time for us to go upstairs and get him in the shower and get ready for bed at a certain time. The win for us is we get him upstairs. Manipulation is if you come upstairs and you'll get to have a treat. It's if you don't come upstairs, I'm going to beat your butt, right? Or something in between. Manipulation. Here are the consequences. I'm gonna deploy. So you're manipulating a child. What is persuasion? It's ridiculously simple. It's negotiation. I want to train my son to negotiate for win-wins. Not negotiate for win-lose, but for win-win. I'm coming with him needing to do something. And if he's not willing to do it, what do I say? What do you need in order to be able to do this? What do you need in order to be able to do this? What do you want to do first? Stupid easy. Sometimes it's like, I'm thirsty. Okay, we'll get you some water. Like just knowing what the other party wants, training my child to be responsive to win-win people, that will enable him to be used to persuaders and resistant to manipulators. So we're not ingraining manipulatability into him. We're ingraining, if I'm not getting a win-win out of this, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to do it. And that will protect him from manipulative partners, manipulative employers, manipulative friends, manipulative governments, manipulative anything, because he was not trained to believe that might makes right. This idea explains why so many teenagers have a rebellious phase. It's because for the first time, they have a little bit more might than their parents do. They have just enough freedom to exercise it to resist 10, 15, 18 years of manipulation. And now they're going to exercise it. And because they were never used to exercising their own agency, what do? They drink and they drive, they do all these sorts of things that are irresponsible because they were never taught to exercise their agency with wisdom. I could get out my soapbox on this for quite a while, this idea of training persuasion as opposed to manipulation in people. But once you choose to polarize with persuasion, and that's okay, that's still going to set some people off. So I do often tweet about my views on religion or nutrition, but I'm aware that I'm not going to use manipulation to do it. I may use shock value, and wow, I didn't think about that at all. Wow, that's weird. But it's never going to be, you're a bad person if you don't think and do as I do.
This is such a great point to tie manipulation into these ideas of polarity. As you were talking about it, it made me think of carelessness. So a lot of people get very confused at how trusted a careless person can be. Like how it can inspire so much trust when somebody comes at something from a careless perspective. And the reason why is because it's not manipulative. It's not manipulative. So, and this is something that I employed with my kids all the time for years, was basically not just behaving in a nonchalant manner, but inspiring a nonchalant session where there was a lack of attachment to what was happening as we were going through the learning process. And the more careless I could get, and the more careless I could make them, the more I could suggest an extreme step, the more I could suggest something that would make them uncomfortable, because they knew that where it was coming from. They knew it was coming from a place of clarity. And then the other is that what you're describing, it also aligns the objective, right? So if it's not manipulation, then we're on the same team, right?
Yes.
So we're both headed towards the same direction. And I mean, that's so important with teaching, because with teaching, if you give the impression that you want something different than the student does, then it's a war the whole way through. But if you have your objectives aligned, and you both know it, then you can suggest something that might make the student uncomfortable, or they might disagree, and they'll be game to try it, right? And this happens on the micro level of, the one-on-one teaching, and it happens on the macro level of entire societies, where when people know that objectives are aligned, they're open to it. And then polarization seems to work better within that framework, because if you know that objectives are aligned, and then you say something polarizing, then that is something that's polarizing a person in a way that they disagree with that, then they clearly can, without stress, just go, oh, okay, you're not for me. This isn't for me. This isn't what I want. I don't like it. And it's like, great, cool. And then if it's the other, if it's a polarizing statement that is something the person really agrees with, they can, jump in with far less hesitation. So yeah, I agree. The clarity of dropping the manipulation is critical to having any sort of effective dialogue.
And sometimes that means that when you recognize manipulators coming at you, take your ball and go home. And so there's been times where I've put out a tweet that I know is this is going to be polarizing, but I'm not going to use manipulation. I'm stating a fact or pointing out a trend, and there were a lot of people who just absolutely lost their minds and came at with persuasion, guilting, shaming. How could you say this? What's wrong with you? Those sorts of, like, how dare you sorts of things. Manipulation. What does that tell me? That tells me that they have no logical, reasonable, persuasive response to what I've said. That I was so effective at communicating it, demonstrating the value or the truth of what I was saying, that they exhausted all possible logical persuasive responses. And they had nothing to say, but you suck. Insta-block.
Yes. And to attempt to start to tie this into a little bow, I think that what you just described is, I mean, when you speak with that clarity, you are creating structure. You are creating something that is, fixed in place. It doesn't have that arbitrary nature to it. And I mean, for somebody who has thrown all of their structure up, that might be repulsive, but it's probably not somebody that you want around anyways. But I think that I think that speaking with the clarity that you're talking about, I think it's the key to bringing the people that you want towards you. I have very much enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything you would like to add before we finish off? And then also, of course, what are you working on and where can people find you?
I think a good PS to everything that we've talked about so far is the win-win as a rule for long-term success. We began talking about self-employment, was I think is the very first topic. If there's a rule for self-employment, it's creating win-win relationships over and over and over. Meaning, you like what you get paid, they like what they paid for. That's the rule that gives you freedom to pay your power bill however you like. So that's the PS to the conversation, is win-win sustains and grows more businesses, more careers than any type of manipulation, including unheard of, unforeseen discounting, which is one way to manipulate, is just slashing in prices 80% after people have bought, but not enough people bought. And then the previous people who bought are like, wait a second, I paid more than anyone else did. Oh, you're just trying to pay your mortgage because you didn't sell enough this month. I feel manipulated, right? So even there is a good example of manipulation in it. But to finish the bow tying here, it's going to be win-win as the sustenance for success. And that's what true persuasion is, as opposed to manipulation. I've talked before about where I share most of my unfiltered, polarizing hot takes. That's over on Twitter. I'm at Joshua Lisec. I think that's how we connected, was through mutual on Twitter. Yes. I have 150, 160 book writing, book publishing, freelancing, entrepreneurship trainings on my YouTube channel. Real simple, Joshua Lisec. Again, if you just search me, you'll find me. And then I have some writing courses as well on the Gumroad e-learning platform. Search Joshua Lisec, you'll find me there too. My courses are on writing, persuasion, copywriting, sales, marketing, market research, all the good stuff, all the good stuff.
Wonderful. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you, Josh. I really appreciate it.